After the collapse of the Third Reich and the subsequent capture of many of its leaders, a great mystery arose regarding the fate of their personal belongings. After the Nuremberg Trials and the executions of several high-ranking Nazis, the bodies were secretly cremated to prevent the creation of shrines, and their belongings were confiscated by the Allies. Some of these items ended up in museums or historical archives, but many others over time wound up on the black market or at auctions, where objects with a sinister past attracted collectors willing to pay exorbitant sums. Among the most striking items that have come to light are the luxurious marshal's batons of Hermann Göring, symbols of his megalomania, sold at private auctions for millions. The existence of Heinrich Himmler's personal SS ring, an exclusive piece awarded to select members and recovered after his suicide, has also been documented. Various luxury automobiles used by Nazi leaders, such as armored Mercedes-Benz vehicles, have been restored and auctioned off by collectors in Europe and the United States. Historical recovery. What happened to the belongings of those executed in Nuremberg? After the end of World War II, a process began in Europe to try and convict the top leaders of Nazism and their collaborators. Several countries organized their own trials, but the main figures of the Third Reich were put on trial in the German city of Nuremberg, and 12 of them were sentenced to be hanged. Adolf Hitler, Joseph Goebbels, and Heinrich Himmler had fallen during the final days of the war, so the international press spotlight focused on Hermann Göring, Supreme Commander of the Luftwaffe, that is, the German Air Force, President of the Reichstag, and officially Hitler's successor until a few days before the Führer's death. Göring was arrested by American troops on May 6, 1945, and became the most sought-after figure during the Nuremberg trials. The tribunal, formed in October of that year by representatives of the Allied powers, had the goal of judging the involvement of a long list of Third Reich personalities in the crimes committed during the conflict. For a year, dozens of defendants and witnesses passed through the courtroom in Nuremberg, including 24 high-ranking Nazi officers who were charged with 4 counts: conspiracy to commit crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Of these 24 regime leaders, a dozen were sentenced to death: Göring, Ribbentrop, Keitel, Kaltenbrunner, Rosenberg, Frank, Frick, Streicher, Sauckel, Jodl, Seyss, Inquart, and Bormann. The latter, Hitler's secretary and party chief, was tried in absentia as he was missing and later found to have died while trying to flee Berlin. 2 weeks passed between the sentencing and the executions. All appealed to revoke the death penalty or, in the event the sentence was upheld, to be executed by firing squad, since hanging was considered a dishonorable death. On October 11th, the tribunal rejected the appeals and upheld the sentences. The next day, the condemned were allowed to see their families for the last time, and the executions were scheduled for the early morning of October 16th. Hours before going to the gallows, Hermann Göring died in his cell. Although it has never been proven, it is most likely that the poison was supplied by an American. In 2005, a former American soldier confessed that a woman had given him a fountain pen with medicine inside to deliver to Göring. While Göring lay in the prison morgue, the other 10 condemned to death were hanged one after another in 1 hour and 34 minutes in the prison gymnasium. At 1:11 a.m., Ribbentrop entered the gym and was the first to be hanged. Each was allowed to say final words, and the most common were patriotic references, such as in the case of Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop, who firmly stated, "God protect Germany," and then, "My last wish is that German unity remains and that understanding between East and West is achieved and peace for the world." Others continued to proclaim their anti-Semitic tirades until the very last moment. According to German law, the bodies should have been handed over to the families within 24 hours after execution, but the Allies were concerned that the remains or burial sites of figures like Göring might become Nazi shrines. This concern led them to dismiss the idea of handing over the bodies to the families, and they decided to cremate the corpses and throw the ashes into the Isar River. Previously proposed alternatives included taking them by boat to the North Sea and discarding them somewhere in the Atlantic, or burying them in the prison itself, with the risk that the site would become a place of pilgrimage. In most cases, their clothes and uniforms were also burned, while insignia or jewelry made of gold, silver, or precious stones were preserved to reuse the materials. Other highly symbolic decorations, such as iron crosses, often obtained through criminal acts, were supposedly destroyed and eliminated to erase all traces of Nazi symbolism from the face of the earth. However, there are differing versions about this. To begin with, during the time some Nazi criminals spent in prison, it is known that they handed over certain items, such as decorations, silver and gold objects and medals, as a form of extortion in an attempt to gain benefits from American guards. Furthermore, it has not been proven that all the precious items captured by the Allies were destroyed, as is clearly shown by the command batons of Göring and other Nazi generals, or the ceremonial swords, daggers and rings that Himmler awarded to distinguished SS officers. In many cases, some of these items ended up in museums, donated by the captors of the Nazi war criminals or by private collectors who purchased them legally. But there is also a deep black market for Nazi memorabilia, where items such as iron crosses, SS skull rings, ceremonial daggers, or simply uniforms that belong to known Nazis are bought and sold for hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. As expected, most of these collectors have enough money to ensure their privacy, although they are often pursued by organizations dedicated to eradicating fascist and Nazi symbolism, as these are considered fetishistic elements that promote hate and anti-Semitism. Still, there are reports and accounts that place personal items of those judged in Nuremberg in private collections and used in rituals in lodges, in Freemasonry, or in secret societies like the American Skull and Bones. The Mandate of Evil, Göring's impressive field marshal's baton, which cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. One of the most prized objects of Nazism, not only because of its great economic value but also for its symbolic power, was the Field Marshal's baton of Hermann Göring, head of the German Air Force and one of the highest-ranking Nazi leaders. The baton, or staff of command, has its origin in the rod received by the consuls of Rome, which represented supreme command over each of the command rods in the bundle of the Roman tribes that made up the Roman people. Over time, these were extended to Roman legates with civil and military authority in the provinces of the empire. However, there are also earlier records dating back to the era of classical Greece. This is documented, for example, for the army of Sparta, about which Plutarch reports that the general Gylippus, during the siege of Syracuse in 414 BC, assumed the role solely by receiving his staff of command and general's cloak. But at the beginning of the 20th century, batons and staffs of command once again became a symbol for political movements linked to fascism. In fact, the term fascism comes from the fasces, harmless sticks or rods used by the bodyguards of Roman dignitaries to indicate the high rank of those they protected. A small axe was later added to the tip, but they were never used as weapons. At most, they were used to strike common people to clear the way for nobles. Mussolini took the symbol of the fasces to create fascism, and Hitler copied his criteria. That's why after 1935, the German Wehrmacht and the Reich resumed granting field marshal batons to their most important generals. Most of these batons were confiscated by the Allies at the end of World War II and are now displayed in museums around the United States, while others were dismantled and sold for their valuable materials, such as gold, silver, and precious stones. In the case of the lesser-known ones, they have circulated on the Nazi memorabilia black market for decades and are highly sought after by collectors of historical artifacts. The first baton awarded by Hitler was to Field Marshal Werner von Blomberg. The handle of this baton was covered in light blue velvet. It is currently housed at the National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. Later, Hitler awarded the first Air Force baton to Hermann Göring, following his promotion to Field Marshal. Although its design was similar to the Blomberg baton with a light blue velvet shaft, it incorporated the symbols of the Air Force's Balkenkreuz, Balk Cross. Additionally, the end caps were inlaid with numerous small diamonds. It is currently preserved in the National Infantry Museum in Fort Moore, Georgia. The next baton awarded was that of Grand Admiral Erich Raeder. The handle of this baton was covered in dark blue velvet. It differed from other batons in having a chain-link pattern sewn over the crosses, eagles, and anchors. At the end of the war, it is said the baton was dismantled and sold in parts, as its materials had extremely high value. In the summer of 1940, 9 military batons were awarded to newly promoted field marshals. The handles of the batons were covered in red velvet and differed only by the identifying inscriptions at the ends. Later, 8 more batons of this style were awarded to other field marshals after their promotions. The first group was manufactured for what would be about €40,000 each today. Most of these batons are currently in museums or private collections. In the summer of 1940, 3 Air Force batons were awarded. They were covered in blue velvet and had the Balkenkreuz design, differing only in the individual inscriptions at the ends. Another baton of this style was awarded in 1943. The 1940 Air Force batons were slightly more expensive to manufacture than the 1940 Army batons. The only additional naval baton was awarded to Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz. It had a blue velvet shaft and incorporated the symbol of a submarine at one end. It is currently held at the Shropshire Regimental Museum in Shrewsbury, United Kingdom, and was donated by Major General J.B. Churcher, who captured Dönitz at the end of the war and took the baton. But among all the batons awarded by Hitler, one stood out. It was the only Reichsmarschall baton, which was given to Hermann Göring when he was granted the title of the only Reich Marshal, the highest rank in the military forces, in a promotion ceremony held at the Kroll Opera House in Berlin on July 19, 1940. Although its appearance was similar to the other 1940 batons, its difference lay in its intrinsic value, as it incorporated exceptional materials in addition to the typical precious ones. The handle was made of white elephant ivory, not metal covered in velvet. The end caps incorporated platinum in the inscription band and more than 600 small diamonds. The baton was manufactured at a value that today would be approximately €150,000, a small fortune. It is probably one of the most coveted objects by major collectors of Nazi memorabilia, as it is a unique and irreplaceable item. However, it was confiscated by the Allies and is currently safeguarded and on display at the West Point Museum of the United States Army in Highland Falls, New York. The Blue Goose, the story behind Göring's legendary car that survived to this day. In 1936, Mercedes-Benz presented the special model 540K, called 540Ks, a very luxurious Grand Tourer, based on a chassis with a shorter wheelbase of 2,980 millimeters and with a carefully crafted bodywork, as it would be used mainly by the leadership of the National Socialist Party. Its price was quite high, at 28,000 German marks, which was related to its excellent manufacturing as well as its scarcity, since only 32 units of this luxurious car were produced. In 1937, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring ordered a 540 Ks in his favorite color, a very sober cobalt shade known as Luftwaffe Blue, since it was the identifying color of the German Air Force. Most 540 Ks at the time were black, green, or red, so Göring's eye-catching car immediately received a nickname, the Blue Goose, since it was very elegant and had a long hood, like the neck of the animal. Göring was often photographed in the car, which bore his family's coat of arms painted on the doors and gold plaques in various parts, such as the glove compartment. Some claim that Göring did not pay for the Blue Goose himself, but that the car was a gift from Hitler, according to a golden plaque attached to the glove compartment door. The car had all the comforts of the time. It had bulletproof glass, the sides were also armored, and the body was reinforced to the point that it was said to be able to withstand a bomb explosion. However, there was an unexpected problem upon delivery. Göring did not fit in the car. The Reichsmarschall had developed a severe morphine addiction and suffered from morbid obesity, so the 540 Ks had to be returned to Mercedes, and the company redesigned the seats, removing part of the padding to allow the corpulent Reichsmarschall to sit behind the wheel. Despite all his decorations, Göring did not devote most of his time to establishing a successful strategy to win the air war against Great Britain, but spent most of his time confiscating stolen artworks and other riches, as well as indulging in the vice of morphine, which led to the persistent disdain of his subordinates, who called him fat bastard. Nevertheless, although he lacked neither artifacts, artworks, nor other luxurious whims among all his possessions, the Mercedes 540 Ks was his favorite, and there are numerous photographs of him next to the vehicle. As the war began to end, soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division, the 3rd Infantry Division of the US Army, and the 2nd Division of the French Army spoke of the discovery of the famous Blue Goose as a war prize, although they knew that formal rules implied that an ordinary soldier could never seize a war trophy as important as a luxury car worth over $20,000 at the time. Even so, just finding it was prize enough for the soldiers, as the beautiful car was an icon of the powerful German industry. Once the Allies reached the Nazi playground of Berchtesgaden near the Austrian border, the soldiers discovered that the huge complex where Hitler, Göring, Secretary Martin Bormann and other important Nazis had private mansions had been heavily bombed by the British just a few days earlier. Therefore, instead of looking for the Blue Goose in garages destroyed by bombs, the soldiers proceeded to loot the wine cellars and liquor cabinets of Hitler's house at the Berghof and those of the other Nazi leaders. After all, that kind of war loot they could enjoy themselves, and it wouldn't be confiscated by their superiors. The Allies, most of whom had survived the carnage of the Battle of the Bulge, got drunk to the bone, and later estimates claim they drank around $1 million worth in a single weekend. During one of the alcohol-driven excursions, the soldiers stumbled upon a building that had not been completely demolished and discovered a garage inside which was the legendary Blue Goose. One of the soldiers shot the car's windshield, thinking, drunk, that doing so would deactivate an invisible explosive trap, but nothing exploded. The soldiers were right. None of them ended up acquiring the luxury car. Once confiscated, it was used as a staff vehicle. Major General Maxwell Taylor used it as a command vehicle in West Germany until it was turned over to the US Treasury, and thus it was sent to North America upon arriving in Washington, D.C. It carried out a victory tour where it was presented as war booty throughout the country. Then, in 1956, it was auctioned by the US Army at the Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, and sold to Jacques Tunick of Greenwich, Connecticut, who paid $2,167 of that era for it. A real bargain, considering that in Germany the car cost 6 or 7 times more. In 1958, Tunick sold the car to the private collection of veterinarian Dr. George Bitgood Jr., who decided to paint it black and restore the chrome on the visibly metallic parts. Bitgood decided to keep the Blue Goose privately and only exhibited it once at the Durham County Fair in Connecticut in 1973. After the veterinarian's death, his heirs received the car, which was exhibited in June 2002 at the 101st Air Force reunion in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Later, the Bitgood family sold the car to Carnlow International Limited of Guernsey, its current owners, with the agreement that it would be restored to its original condition, as it was found in Berchtesgaden, and painted in the iconic Luftwaffe blue that had given rise to the legend of the Blue Goose. Memories of hatred, what happened to Hermann Göring's medals and honors. Hermann Göring joined the Imperial German Army in 1912 and, with the outbreak of the First World War, he was transferred to aviation, where he quickly stood out as a combat pilot. As he accumulated kills on the Western Front, his reputation grew among his comrades and superiors. For his bravery in the air, he received the Iron Cross Second Class and, shortly after, the Iron Cross First Class. These decorations, which symbolized individual heroism and loyalty to the Empire, were awarded only to those who demonstrated exceptional merit in combat. Göring soon received other distinctions, such as the Bavarian Military Merit Medal and the Military Merit Order of the same region. In 1918, after the death of the legendary Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron, Göring was appointed commander of Jasta 11, the most prestigious squadron of the German Air Force. He was also awarded the Pour le Mérite, the highest military distinction of the German Empire. This blue cross hung from a ribbon around the neck and was awarded personally by the Kaiser. The version awarded to Göring had his name engraved on the reverse, as was customary in the final distributions. It is important to note that during those years, having received the Pour le Mérite, also known as the Blue Max due to its blue color, entailed the obligation to wear it constantly in public. Although it had existed since 1740, this decoration became internationally famous during the First World War because, while it could be awarded to any military officer, its most famous recipients were combat pilots, the first aces in history, which greatly increased the symbolic value of the Merit Medal. In aerial warfare, a fighter pilot was initially nominated for the award after shooting down 8 enemy planes. Air Ace Max Immelmann was the first pilot to receive the decoration, after which the Blue Max became known and coveted among the other pilots. This decoration became so important that the number of planes required to be shot down in order to qualify steadily increased throughout the war, until by the end of the conflict it required the downing of 20 enemy planes, an extraordinary feat. Nevertheless, the decoration did not lose its elitist and aristocratic character. A third of those awarded in the First World War were generals or admirals. Göring received the award in 1918 for having shot down 20 enemies, and he ended the war with 22 confirmed kills. After the war, Göring kept his decorations as personal symbols of prestige. Some of them, like the Pour le Mérite, were imbued with an almost sacred aura among nationalist circles in defeated Germany. With the rise of Nazism to power in 1933, Göring became one of the most powerful figures of the regime, founder of the Gestapo, supreme commander of the Luftwaffe, and designated as Hitler's successor. His uniform began to fill with new medals, carefully designed to represent the supposed glory of the reborn Reich. Among the first in his collection was the Blood Order, a distinction created for those who participated in the failed coup of 1923. Göring, wounded by a bullet on that occasion, was one of the first to receive it. Later, he was decorated with the Nazi Party Gold Badge, reserved for veteran members with significant ideological and political merit. During the years of territorial expansion, Göring also received the Sudetenland Medal and the Medal of the Annexation of Austria, symbols of the peaceful, although later violent, annexation of territories to Nazi Germany. As his power consolidated, the decorations began to reflect not only military feats but also his central role in the machinery of the regime. As commander of the Luftwaffe, he was awarded the War Merit Cross with swords and diamonds, a distinction created by the regime itself. He also received the Grand Cross of the Iron Cross, an extremely rare and symbolic variant. Only 2 people received it during the Third Reich, Hitler and himself. Göring's custom-made uniform in various shades of blue was a walking showcase of honors, his medals stretched in multiple rows across his chest and belt, topped with miniature crosses hanging from his neck. More than a military recognition, the decorations had become a display of his vanity and his almost princely position within the Nazi state. With the collapse of the Third Reich in 1945, the fate of the personal possessions of its leaders became a story of dispersion, looting, and concealment. When Göring was captured by US forces in May 1945, he carried with him only a small selection of decorations. Most of his treasures, including uniforms, ceremonial swords, marshal's batons, and numerous medals, had been previously sent to safe locations or hidden on private properties. During his detention in Nuremberg, Göring managed to keep a few medals, although he was stripped of the right to wear them publicly. Images from the trial show him without his ostentatious uniforms, yet still trying to impose a presence through his bearing. He ultimately died in the early morning of October 15, 1946, before being executed. Many of his original decorations, especially those he had in Nuremberg, were confiscated by the United States Army. During the interrogations and his stay at the Allied headquarters, some of these medals were catalogued, photographed, and sent to official military collections, such as the US Army Museum at West Point or the Royal Air Force Museum in London, although it has been noted that some of the medals on display may be faithful replicas, others simply disappeared, victims of looting or the black market for Nazi items that flourished in the post-war years. It is known that several of his most valuable medals, including his Pour le Mérite, were last seen in the hands of American officers who took them as souvenirs or small war trophies. Years later, some reappeared in private auctions, although their authenticity is disputed by experts. The lack of official documentation and the proliferation of replicas hinder exact traceability. Part of Göring's personal archive, including photographs in which he wore his medals, was recovered and classified by the Allies. In these images, preserved in historical archives, one can see in detail the sets of insignia he used according to the occasion, gala, campaign, or diplomatic functions. In later decades, certain objects attributed to his property were auctioned in houses such as Hermann Historiker in Germany or online after the 1990s, although irrefutable proof of authenticity was rarely presented. A notable example is the replica of the Pour le Mérite that allegedly belonged to him, which appeared in a private collection in Switzerland in the 1980s. However, its provenance was never confirmed, and many experts believe that the authentic items were destroyed, buried, or confiscated by Soviet agents without any documentation. The Grand Cross of the Iron Cross, due to its rarity, has been the subject of intense debate. Various sources suggest that the medal was stolen or destroyed, although there is a theory that it was taken to the United States along with other confiscated objects of the Reichsmarschall. However, no museum has confirmed its possession. The current German government prohibits the public display of Nazi decorations that contain Third Reich symbols, which complicates their exhibition and registration. In military museums such as the Deutsches Historisches Museum in Berlin or the Imperial War Museum in London, similar decorations are displayed, but none has been officially identified as Göring's property. His ceremonial uniform, laden with medals and designed for Reichstag appearances, was captured by American soldiers and later taken to Fort Meade, Maryland. It remains stored there without permanent exhibition as part of the US government's military historical archive. The Reich's most expensive railway, Göring's opulent Sonderzug Asien. During the Second World War, Hermann Göring, commander-in-chief of the Luftwaffe and a prominent figure of the Third Reich, had a special train known as Sonderzug Asien. This convoy not only served as a means of transport, but also as a mobile headquarters and a symbol of his status within the Nazi regime. In fact, all high-ranking Nazis had their own trains, known as Sonderzugs or special trains, the most famous of which was the one used by Hitler, the Führersonderzug. However, what made Göring's train different from those of other important officials of the National Socialist Party is that much of his special train has been preserved. The code name Asien, which designated Göring's train, was used from September 1, 1939 to January 31, 1943. Subsequently, from February 1, 1943, the train was renamed Pommern 1, while an auxiliary train for personnel and vehicles was named Pommern 2. The Sonderzug Asien consisted of approximately 15 cars, although its exact configuration varied according to needs. Among the notable components were anti-aircraft defense cars, or flak wagons, which were located at both ends of the train, equipped with anti-aircraft guns for protection against both small aircraft and bombers. There were also generator cars, which provided electric power to the train when it was stationary, ensuring the operation of essential systems. Then came the salon and sleeping cars, which included Göring's main salon, sleeping quarters for the staff, and rest areas. The dining car, or Salonspeiswagen, was very luxurious and was designed with 2 dining rooms and kitchens, decorated with fine woods and equipped with modern appliances for the time. Of course, being one of the most important generals of the Reich, the Sonderzug Asien featured a conference car, which also served as a mobile command center and was usually used for strategic meetings and military planning. It included instruments such as radios, maps, and other communication and military planning tools. Finally, the train also included a bathroom car, a press car, and other functional spaces, reflecting the importance of mobility and comfort for high-level operations of the Third Reich. The Sonderzug Asien served multiple purposes, the main one being to act as a mobile headquarters during the most difficult moments of the war, allowing Göring to oversee military operations and make strategic decisions while traveling through occupied territories. As we mentioned earlier, Göring had a deep love for opulence, luxury, and art, so his train also served as transport for looted art. The Sonderzug was used to move artworks and valuable items confiscated in occupied Europe, as well as other assets such as coins and bars of gold and silver. Ultimately, Hitler decided to implement these special trains as a symbol of power. The opulence of the train reflected Göring's status within the Nazi regime, serving as an extension of his public image. The train made frequent trips between Berlin and Göring's headquarters, known as Jägerhof, located near Rastenburg in East Prussia. It was also used for visits to battlefronts and other official missions. With the collapse of the Third Reich in 1945, the fate of the Sonderzug Asien became uncertain. Some of its cars were captured by Allied forces, while others were reused or dismantled in the years following the war. One of the anti-aircraft defense cars was identified in Delitzsch, Saxony, and later converted into a sanitary car for the state train of the German Democratic Republic in the 1970s. Despite efforts to trace and preserve parts of the train, much of its original structure has been lost or remains in an unknown location. However, the Sonderzug Asien remains a testament to the Nazi regime's use of railway infrastructure for military, logistical, and propaganda purposes. The craftsmanship of evil, Heinrich Himmler's costly engraved weapons. Objects recovered from the Second World War, especially those that belong to or are closely associated with Nazi leaders, are often cult items for certain history enthusiasts and collectors linked to fascist ideologies. And among the most desired objects we find the curious pistols of Heinrich Himmler. These were not pistols that he personally used, as most Nazis, especially at the end of the war, carried whatever weapons were available. Rather, they were handguns created as recognition or special gifts for some distinguished SS officers. Before getting into the more widely produced models, so to speak, let's talk about a very particular ceremonial-style weapon that belonged to Adolf Hitler. On his 50th birthday in 1939, Adolf Hitler received a 7.65mm Walther PP pistol from Karl Walter, the famous German gunsmith. However, it wasn't a regular Walther. It was made of gold and exquisitely decorated, lavishly engraved and adorned. On the white ivory grips of the handle, the inscription AH could be read. The inscription on the weapon, crafted entirely by hand, indicates that it came from Walther, who personally gifted the weapon to the Führer, as the leader had armed much of his army with Walther P-38 semi-automatic pistols to replace the Luger P-08, greatly boosting the gunsmith's industry. Today, it is estimated that the gold pistol could be worth close to $1 million. Reportedly, the weapon was discovered by U.S. Army First Lieutenant Ira Palm in Hitler's former apartment in Munich at the end of April 1945. However, in the 1980s, it was sold to a private firearms collector for $114,000 at the time. Now, diving into the pistols linked to the SS Reichsführer, we must first mention the famous Sauer 38H, signed by Heinrich Himmler. These target pistols were produced during the final years of Nazism, before the war effort forced a reduction in arms operations. Known to collectors as Model 38 HJP Sauer and Sohn Heinrich Himmler, it is an extremely rare pistol that was used in shooting competitions. Reportedly, these pistols were awarded to German snipers who achieved 100 confirmed kills, like a rougher version of the Pour le Mérite medal. Although it is believed that around 100 of these pistols were made, only 5 examples are known, and one of them was captured at Hitler's house in Berchtesgaden, supposedly gifted to him by the SS chief. Some recovered models were auctioned off, and the most recent public sales have exceeded $80,000. Regarding its technical characteristics, this exclusive Model 38 has a high-gloss blue finish with a presentation inscription on the left side of the slide. The left side of the slide bears the inscription Dem Scharfschützen, followed by an engraved facsimile of the signature H. Himmler, indicating that each weapon represented the favor of the SS Reichsführer. The right side of the slide carries the standard 2-line late production factory legend J.P. Sauer & Son Sul Caliber 7.65, which appears on the opposite side from standard production pistols. The slide is internally numbered to match the frame, and the pistol has black checkered plastic grips with the Sauer monogram in a circle on the left grip panel. Although at first glance it looks like a small standard pistol, Himmler's engraved signature and the small differences from the common Sauer 38 turn the weapon into one of the most coveted items by shooters and collectors, and thousands of replicas are sold online today. However, the Sauer 38 was not the most exclusive pistol bearing Himmler's signature. That title goes to the Walther PP H. Himmler, an engraved and hand-finished pistol intended to be worn as a decoration or for ceremonial purposes by important Nazi figures or distinguished SS officers. These weapons varied over the years. Some featured workmanship similar to Hitler's famous gold pistol, while others were engraved on one profile and carried inscriptions on the other, with varying details and decorations. In any case, and considering the models that were recovered or captured after the war, we can affirm that the pistols are in themselves authentic masterpieces of Walther engraving, and all carry the engraved facsimile of the signature H. Himmler. Most of the models found show that 98% of their metal surfaces are fully engraved in the deep and traditional Germanic oak leaf and acorn style, chiseled by hand, with geometric designs and cross-hatched borders over the chamber of the barrel. The only smooth section is the upper curve of the front strap. The right side of the frame, slide, and barrel carry the traditional eagle/N commercial proof mark from the Nazi era. It is equipped with a set of grips featuring a beautiful aged medium brown color with magnificent grain. The upper left grip bears a small black enamel double S insignia inlaid into the panel, and the lower area features a rectangular gold plate with the signature and inscription H. Himmler. The right grip also features a small gilded Nazi eagle emblem with outstretched wings. Of course, today it is very difficult to find original versions of these weapons, and the vast majority are replicas of varying levels of craftsmanship and quality. Those few originals have been sold to private collectors for tens of thousands of dollars and are occasionally displayed in museums or historic weaponry exhibits. Himmler's Grand Mercedes, the armored limousine used by the SS chief. Between 1930 and 1943, Mercedes-Benz produced the 770 model, known as the Grand Mercedes, a luxury limousine intended for heads of state, monarchs, and high-ranking officials. Its imposing design and advanced technology made it a symbol of power and prestige. The first series, designated W07, was introduced in 1930 and featured a 7.7-litre inline 8-cylinder engine capable of producing 150 horsepower without supercharging and up to 200 with a Roots-type supercharger. This model could reach speeds of up to 160 kilometers per hour. The second series, W150, launched in 1938, featured improvements in chassis, suspension, and armor, adapting to the increasing security needs of the era. These limousines were used by figures such as Adolf Hitler, Hermann Göring, and Heinrich Himmler, as well as by foreign leaders allied with the Third Reich. The Mercedes-Benz 770K stood out for its advanced engineering and exceptional safety measures for its time. The W150 model incorporated a 7.7-litre inline 8-cylinder engine with a supercharger, producing approximately 230 horsepower. Despite its weight, which could exceed 4.5 tons due to its armor, it could reach speeds of up to 170 kilometers per hour, although it was recommended to limit it to 80 kilometers per hour to preserve the tires. The armor included 18mm steel in the body, bulletproof glass up to 40mm thick, and a reinforced floor to withstand mines. In addition, it featured a retractable steel panel behind the rear seat to protect occupants from rear attacks. The heating system directed hot air through ducts to the windshield to prevent fogging. One of the most notable examples of the 770K was assigned to Heinrich Himmler, chief of the SS. This vehicle, delivered in 1943 to the Reich Chancellery, featured all the aforementioned armor specifications. It also incorporated a central locking system and additional security measures. The car was used by Himmler in various official functions and remained in service until the end of the war. At the conclusion of the conflict, it was abandoned in Obersalzberg and later recovered by Allied forces. After the fall of the Third Reich, many of the Mercedes-Benz 770K vehicles used by high-ranking officials were captured by the Allied forces. Some were used by the victorious armies, while others ended up in the hands of private collectors or museums. Himmler's vehicle was recovered and preserved and is on display at the Sinsheim Museum as part of a collection of antique or historically significant cars. It is a historic piece that offers a tangible glimpse into the power and opulence of the Nazi regime. Its preservation allows for the study and reflection on a dark period in history, reminding us of the importance of memory and education in preventing the repetition of such events. The most expensive helmet in the world. Why is it so valuable? During World War I, the high rates of head injuries led the Imperial German Army to replace the traditional leather Pickelhaube with a more effective steel helmet. The result was the M1916 Stahlhelm, designed by Dr. Friedrich Schwerd of the Technical Institute of Hanover. Inspired by the medieval Salle, it offered superior protection for the head and neck. Its introduction at the Battle of Verdun in 1916 marked a significant decrease in head injuries among German troops. With the rise of the Third Reich, the Stahlhelm was redesigned to suit modern needs. In 1935, the MM35 model was introduced, made of chrome-nickel steel with a more rounded shape and lacking the prominent lugs of the earlier model. Later, the M40 and M42 models incorporated changes to facilitate mass production, such as the removal of certain rivets and simplification of the design. These helmets were manufactured in various sizes, with weights ranging from 810 to 1,230 grams, depending on the size. The M35 featured rivets in the ventilation holes, while the M40 replaced these with stamped indentations to reduce costs and improve safety. The M42 eliminated the rolled edge, leaving it uncurved, further simplifying production. The Stahlhelm offered superior protection against fragments and shrapnel compared to other helmets of the time. However, it had some drawbacks. The ventilation holes could let in cold air during winter, and its design often hindered hearing, creating echoes when speaking. Additionally, the helmet's weight could be uncomfortable during long periods of use. Despite these flaws, the Stahlhelm became a symbol of the German soldier, representing discipline and the power of the Third Reich's army. The Schutzstaffel, under the leadership of Heinrich Himmler, adopted the Stahlhelm as an integral part of their uniform, but with distinctive modifications. In the early years, the SS reused M16 helmets from the First World War, repainted black and adorned with specific insignia such as the SS runes and the Totenkopf or skull, symbols that evoked both Germanic mysticism and an image of death and power. These insignia not only served to identify the units but also reinforced the SS ideology as an elitist and feared order. The Totenkopf in particular had roots in Prussian military units and was reinterpreted by the SS to symbolize their connection to an alleged ancestral warrior heritage. However, after the war, some apocryphal historians coined the term Himmler helmets, which has been used to describe certain helmets directly associated with Heinrich Himmler or with SS units under his command. However, there is no conclusive evidence that Himmler had a personalized helmet model. Nevertheless, war history enthusiasts continue to use this term to refer to standard SS helmets that, due to their association with Himmler and elite units, acquired a special aura or were simply adorned with symbols related to the Schutzstaffel. There are also fake replicas that have become popular on the internet, showing helmets with apocryphal insignia, crosses, or metal decorations that were not actually used at the time. The original helmets, often M35 or M40 models, could indeed feature the distinctive characteristics of the SS, such as decals with runes and the skull, and were used by units like the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler and the SS Totenkopfverbände, responsible for the administration of concentration camps. After World War II, many German helmets were reused by other countries or ended up in the hands of collectors. SS helmets, due to their rarity and historical connotations, became highly valuable items in the military antiques market. However, their display and sale are regulated in several countries due to laws prohibiting the promotion of Nazi symbols. In fact, it is believed that one of these helmets may be the most expensive in the world, and it is none other than the one that belonged to the very Reichsführer of the SS, Heinrich Himmler. After Himmler's capture, American forces entered his villa, a large mansion located on the shores of Lake Tegernsee, which had been converted into a small headquarters with reinforced walls and ceiling to withstand bombings. When the Allies entered the Reichsführer's house, they did not find his family, who had already fled, but the place was filled with the Nazi leader's personal belongings, as well as other valuables such as artwork, weapons, gold, and extremely expensive beverages. The vast majority of Himmler's personal belongings were destroyed, although some soldiers managed to recover medals, handguns, photographs, insignia, and other memorabilia, which in most cases would be confiscated by the authorities or sold illegally after the war. One such case was that of Corporal Raymond W. Dykard, a young American who participated in the raids and returned to the United States with a very particular souvenir, one of the famous black SS helmets. But this one had a major difference from all the other captured models. On the inside, it had the name of the very Reichsführer of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, engraved, indicating that it was his personal helmet, the one he had used at the beginning of the war until the year 1940. After Dykard's death, his son donated the helmet to the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York, where it remains on display to this day. And while it has never been auctioned, so there is no specific sale price tied to this curious item, it is considered to be the most expensive helmet in the world. This is because a similar helmet, which belonged to a much lower-ranking SS officer, was sold for $6,500 at an auction in New York in 2022. While that is already an impressive price for a helmet, it is merely a fraction of what Himmler's helmet could be worth, estimated to be 10 times that amount, even surpassing collectible helmets from the Middle Ages. However, the Holocaust Museum does not plan to sell it and probably never will. Today, these helmets are studied not only as military artifacts but also as symbols of an ideology that wreaked havoc in Europe. Their analysis provides insight into how design and symbolism were used to instill fear and consolidate power during the Nazi regime. All the gold in the world, the lost treasure of the lavish minister von Ribbentrop. Joachim von Ribbentrop was one of the most controversial figures of the Third Reich. Although he did not come from the German nobility, he managed to insert himself into the highest spheres of Nazi power thanks to a mix of ambition, opportunism, and an innate ability to navigate among diplomats and authoritarian leaders. Born in 1893 in Wassel, Prussia, Ribbentrop had a wandering youth marked by stays in Canada, the United Kingdom, and France. During the 1920s, he settled in Germany as a wine merchant and managed to amass a modest fortune, which allowed him to enter exclusive social circles. It was in that environment that he met Adolf Hitler. Impressed by his refined style, European manners, and international connections, Hitler brought him in as a foreign policy advisor. Ribbentrop rose quickly. In 1933, he was appointed Special Ambassador of the Third Reich and later Ambassador to London, where he unsuccessfully tried to forge an alliance between Germany and the United Kingdom. In 1938, Hitler appointed him Minister of Foreign Affairs, a position he held until the collapse of the Nazi regime in 1945. As the Reich's foreign minister, Ribbentrop played a crucial role in the regime's international relations. He was the chief architect of the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, also known as the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, signed on August 23, 1939. This agreement temporarily sealed peace between two irreconcilable ideological enemies, Nazi Germany and Stalin's Soviet Union. Its secret clause, which divided Eastern Europe into spheres of influence, was the direct trigger for the invasion of Poland and the outbreak of World War II. Ribbentrop also participated in the diplomatic coordination that justified the occupation of Austria and Czechoslovakia, and was a staunch defender of German territorial expansion under the concept of Lebensraum. However, beyond his role as minister, Ribbentrop was also a symbol of the unbridled luxury and systematic plundering that characterized many Nazi leaders. During the war, he surrounded himself with a lifestyle that brutally contrasted with the destruction and suffering of the European people. He lived in a lavish villa in Berlin, decorated with 18th-century French furniture, Persian rugs, Renaissance tapestries, and an extensive collection of stolen artworks. His personal wine cellar contained more than 400 bottles of high-end wines, including Chateau Lafite and Chateau Margaux, confiscated from Jewish collections or seized in France during the occupation. Ribbentrop was one of the main beneficiaries of the cultural looting program orchestrated by the Nazis. Every time a treaty was signed or a new embassy was inaugurated, he demanded a valuable piece of art as a diplomatic gift, regardless of its origin. Post-war reports reveal that a significant part of his wealth came from the direct plundering of Jewish properties and European museums. It wasn't just about financial ambition, but also about personal validation. Ribbentrop, who had purchased his noble title by marrying Anneliese Henkel, daughter of a champagne magnate, longed for recognition from European aristocratic elites. His diplomatic parties were carefully choreographed events, with foreign guests, orchestras, crystal glasses, and exquisite delicacies, all while systematic crimes against humanity were being committed in concentration camps. The fall of the Third Reich reached him in May 1945. He was captured by British troops and brought to trial before the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg. During the trial, Ribbentrop tried to minimize his responsibility, presenting himself as a mere bureaucrat who followed orders. But the evidence was overwhelming. He had actively participated in the planning of aggressive wars, the implementation of anti-Semitic policies, and the cultural plundering of Europe. He was found guilty on all counts: crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The tribunal determined that his role as foreign minister was essential in consolidating Nazi domination over the continent. On October 16, 1946, he was executed by hanging. Ironically, the man who had toasted for years with silver goblets to the successes of the Third Reich was the first to be called to the gallows at Nuremberg. He was 53 years old. After his death, many of the objects he had collected mysteriously disappeared. Only a fraction was recovered and returned to their rightful owners. The rest is believed to have been hidden by his collaborators or sold on the black art market, where some researchers still attempt to trace their whereabouts. To this day, informal auctions continue to appear, where silverware, goblets, medals, and other items linked to this lavish diplomat are sold. However, in 1946, the Allies found von Ribbentrop's real stash in a building he had illegally rented. The small villa Schloss Fuschel, which was a protected hunting estate, had been illegally leased in 1939 to the Nazi foreign minister. Near the house, Joachim von Ribbentrop hid several kilograms of gold coins that were recovered. 2 iron boxes with a nominal value of more than $10,000 in gold coins were found there after the war by a local resident, and many researchers claim that more treasures may have been hidden. High in the mountains, in the area known as Ostseeland, it is known that billions of dollars in German World War II treasures were hidden, much of which is said to be sunk in the icy waters of alpine lakes. In 1946, American intelligence agents found a torn page from a Nazi accounting book listing a single hidden cache somewhere in Austria. 166 million Swiss francs, 299 million US dollars, $31 billion in gold, $3 million in diamonds, $93 million in stamp and art collections, and more than $5 billion in narcotics. A series of treasures which together add up to an astounding total value of $37 billion. As far as is known, this immense treasure has never been found. For this reason, many treasure hunters continue to search the area and all the places connected to the lavish Minister von Ribbentrop. Up until the year 2000, decorations, high-value personal items, and gala outfits or uniforms used by the diplomat continued to surface, which is why historians have not lost hope that these hidden caches may one day come to light.